Hi guys, it's Nana, Foxy Mama 365. I'm back again with another true life story. And this story is by CNN and it's called Three Identical Strangers. So in this series or in this documentary by CNN, we see three men that have lived apart and they find out that they're triplets. So in the beginning, we see Robert Shafron, I think that's his name. He's headed to college, and he's a freshman, and he's going on. As he gets into the college, he's like, "Yay, hey!" He's been called out. People are tapping him, and they're like, "Hey, hi, Eddie, you're back. Hey, Eddie!" And people are hugging him, and they're kissing him, and he's like, "What in the world is going on?" Freshman. Yeah. So he gets into his room, and if someone comes in and is like, "Hi, what's your name?" And they introduce themselves and he's like, "I used to be Eddie's friend." And he's like, "Yeah, people have been hugging me and kissing me and mistaking me for Eddie. I'm not Eddie. My name is Bobby." So he's like, "Okay, what is your birthday?" And he's like, "Oh, July 12th, 1961. And immediately the guy knows, because he kind of recognizes that this is not his friend. And he's like, "Oh my God, oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, you have a brother. Were you adopted?" And he's like, "Yes, I was adopted." "Was this the agency?" "Yes, what?" So they rush off in his car and then they're driving at like 80 miles per hour, 100 miles per hour down the highway. It's a 2-hour drive. First of all, they get to call Eddie and Eddie's like, "Hello." And he's like, "Eddie, you don't know what's going on. See, there's someone in here that he's like your brother. He must be your twin or something." And Eddie's in shock. He's like, "What? What are you on about?" So they drive down there. It's a 2-hour drive. They do actually get the police fine, and the policeman is like, "Yeah, right, there must be some emergency why you guys are driving this fast." And they're like, "You don't understand. I just discovered I had a twin brother." And like the policeman is like, "Yeah, cock and bull story. Tell that to the birds." So obviously he doesn't believe them. He gives them the ticket and then they speed right along. And then they get to Eddie's place and Eddie's in shock. Of course, obviously they are waiting for them. And they're like, "Oh my gosh." And they have the same mannerism. They speak alike. And they're like, "Wow." So they sit down and they're like, "Oh, were you adopted?" "I was adopted." "What day's your birthday?" They have the same birthdays. And it's so crazy. So they're very excited. So the following day it's in the papers. The following weeks it's in the papers. Two identical twins have found each other and they're so excited. But guess what? There's a twist in the tale. They find out, because the story is now in most papers, they have a third brother. Hello? And his name is David. So David sees the papers. People are like, "David, and he's like, "What?" So he takes the paper home and shows his mom. His mom like, "Yes, I've seen it. What is going on?" So he calls Eddie's mom. And Eddie's mom is like, "Oh my gosh." In fact, I think she slammed the phone, he said, or first of all. And then later on, he calls again and she's like, "They're coming out of the woodworks. What is going on?" They don't believe it. I mean, it's already a great story that there are two brothers, identical twins, have found each other. And now a third one. So he goes around there and they're so excited. And then they have the same mannerisms and they speak alike. So of course this is a huge story back in the 80s. This is like 1980. So it's a huge story and everybody's fascinated. People are tuned in. They are talking to them. They're dressed alike. They smoke the same thing. They like the same kind of stuff. They all wrestled when they were much younger. They all kind of like the same things. And it's like, wow, how can these people be so similar? And they really talked alike and they look alike. I can't literally not tell you who is who, because that is how alike they look. And then they were all apparently adopted through an agency called Louis Wise Adoption Services. And it's a whole media circus now because they're like, the parents are angry. They're like, "What happened? How come we didn't know there was a brother out there that we could have all adopted all three?" Or they just didn't know. So they sit down they have a meeting. Obviously the parents are angry, But obviously the boys are happy to just have found each other. They're doing a lot of prayers. They're, going, making the circles, making the runs. So the parents actually sit down with the top brass at the agency, and those ones are like, well, we couldn't tell you because most of the time it would have been difficult for any family to adopt 3 people, and I'm like, at least you could have offered it or said and asked us and said, oh guys, this is the situation, is this something you want? So, but apparently that wasn't, they had a different thought to it all. So they now find out that actually the parents were, from like 3 different social strata. The first parents, I think Robert's parents were like rich, from a wealthy and affluent family. Then you had Eddie's parents who were middle class, and then you had Bobby's parents who were like, not really up there, but they were pretty, everyday American citizens who were like blue collared. Their father was going to work, but the father was such a great man. They spent most of their time in David's house because David's dad was really like, oh, now I have 2 more sons, and he was really excited, and they always hung up there. So in the 80s, they started, living their life and having so much fun. They, at the point they moved in together, they were like the hit of the town. They would go out to Studio 54. That was the in place then. They were doing all the sex, the drugs, and all the stuff, rock and roll. So pretty much they were popular. And actually at a point they decide, oh, let's go look for our birth mother. And they actually find out who she is. They actually find her. And they sit down with her at a bar. And apparently she got pregnant at a prom night. It wasn't like a love story, but she talks with them. But they don't really keep up with her as much. But at least they have discovered, okay, this is who. But they never mentioned anything about their dad. And they never said anything about them looking for their dad. Which I thought was like, funny. So the parents actually sat down with the agency. And after the agency was able to convince them that, oh, they couldn't put all 3 of them in one family because it might have been very expensive, whatever. One of the fathers came back. He forgot his umbrella, and he saw these people cracking a bottle of champagne. Like, oh, we just dodged the bullet. So at that point, you decide, oh, maybe we should take legal action out against them. All the legal companies that they approached turned them down because it's a Jewish firm, and they were like, oh, many of them had associates that were trying to adopt as well, and they didn't want it to spoil their, their possibility of getting children from the agency. And apparently this agency was well known. It had been established for a long time, and it was in the Jewish community, So anyways, later on, we see the Triplets. They open a restaurant, and I think it's called Triplets, and they're doing good, and they're making money, and they're doing business. But obviously, the business, when you have business and family together, it always gets sticky, Then they now start thinking. We have Dr. Wright, who is an investigator of he's a psychiatrist actually, and he has been doing some research on twins. And he heard about this research that they did in the 80s on twins and triplets, and he now started digging into it, and he discovers, guess what? They were not the only ones. There were other sets of triplets, no, not triplets, twins, that also had been separated at birth. And they had been doing studies and following the children for almost 20 years. So what I'm saying to you is that this agency had placed these children, and they had also placed prior children with these families, and these families were meant to be different cadres, and they had been following them and monitoring them to kind of discover what their life was right from when they were babies up until they were like 19. They didn't pull the plug on this research until 20 years, when they were like 20, and this must have been when the boys discovered each other. What is going on? So the experiment, according to them, going back and forth, was meant to understand nature versus nurture. Nature in that your DNA, what constitutes you, how you're born, your makeup, and then nurture is after you are born, how you grow, how you are raised, your situation, your family, the love, and all that you are taught. So that was what the research, they said, was meant to be about. So they're thinking, could this be a coincidence that it's not just one family, they're doing it for so many? And then they find out that a lot of the families, or some of the families, had a mental background or a mental history. So then they're wondering, what really was the research about? Unfortunately, the gentleman that started the research, I think his name was Peter Neubauer or something, he had passed on, he had died. So they really didn't get to the end, to the bottom of the research, and it was pulled, the plugs were pulled when the triplets discovered each other, Nobody really knows. He was apparently an Australian refugee. He was a renowned psychiatrist in New York, and now he's doing well, and he has a lot of influence. So they interview him, and he's like, oh, actually, he was just doing it to find out nature versus nurture and what the difference is with parenting style. And then you have the people that are going out doing the interview, a man and a woman, and they get to each family and they never tell anybody, not the parents, not the boys. It's really sad. So we're meant to think, we're being taken back, and we're like, now we have become more humane in that. But in the 80s, people didn't think of it like that. It was more, oh, we're just discovering psychiatry, we're trying to understand how the brain works. It was a lot. Anyways, we see where the people involved are now becoming kind of affected, because we see Eddie having psychiatric problems to the extent where he actually had to be hospitalized. And we also hear from Robert, who says that when he was 16, he spent a 16-year birthday also in a psychiatric ward. So they're trying to understand. So they asked him, was your mother, did she have any mental issues? And he's like, maybe a little. Okay, maybe a little more, But so we're trying to wonder, what really was this research for? Was it to understand psychiatry and its effect on people? And if they use twins or triplets, then they have eliminated the age gap between children. They have used children that are similar, But the truth is, no two people are similar. So now we're going back to nature versus nurture. Then we hear later on, Bobby decides to leave the restaurant because it wasn't working out, and he leaves Eddie and David. And Eddie is so taken aback with it. He goes into the psycho ward, and he comes out after 3 weeks, and one day he just doesn't show up. And they're like, oh, what's going on? By the way, he's married now. He's like 30 something, I'm sure, or maybe close to 40. And they go check on him in his house, and he had committed suicide, which was so sad. Sad. But anyway, they try to understand, get the records, and see why did he commit suicide. And they now hear that, oh, in this same study group, another twin had committed suicide as well. So it wasn't one family or one person, but they tried to play it off that, oh, maybe it was, whatever. So now the men are researching, and they're trying to understand, where is this study? How far did it go? How many people were involved? How many twins are out there that don't even know that they are twins? No answers, because Peter is dead. And they now go into the records, and they find out that the records are actually all the research that he did, which was monitoring them every week, recording it, making all of that for 20 years. is all in Yale University, and it's sealed up, so they can't get to the archives unless they go through, I think it is the board, the Jewish Board of Family and Children's Services. You know, they have to get authorization from them. So they tried to get authorization and they are refused the authorization. But at the end of this interview, we gathered that they were able to. Now, one of the researchers that was actually conducting the research during that time actually spoke on the show. And he's like, it was just so weird. And he goes that actually they were trying to understand the parenting skills. I'm not buying that. Are you? I'm not buying that. There's something else. There's more to it. So he says, well, it was just to understand the parent. So we're like, why you understand? I mean, she must have already had a history of how these parents were. Now, looking back at the three parents, we see where Eddie's parent, who's still alive, his dad is still alive, was a disciplinarian kind of. He was strict, and he was kind of like, their family wasn't that much of, there wasn't that much of, well, Eddie's wife said Eddie always felt like he was out of the loop. He didn't belong there. And then we see Robert's father passing on, and Robert's father was the one that loved all the boys, loved him to bits and pieces, and you know, he was like, oh, nothing you can do no wrong. Whereas we see also, I think what's his name? David's father was the Rock. I'm sorry. And then Bobby's father was also cool. I think he was a medical doctor or something, so he was affluent. So there was kind of a balance in that family. So they were trying to say, oh, at the end of the day, nature might give you stuff, your DNA, whether you're tall, you're dark, you're handsome, you're beautiful, whatever. But at the end of the day, nurture also is very important. So there was really no conclusive findings, because we really don't know. I don't think it ever came to any conclusion, but just that nature might provide you with one thing, and nurture also is very important. Whether you grow up as a child with love, the care, you know, and you're taught the right values. I don't know. What you guys think? At the end of the documentary, the CNN documentary, the board, the Jewish board, had released over 10,000 pages of research, but a lot of it was redacted, so it really didn't tell them much. Well, I don't know. They really didn't publish everything, because they say, oh, there are still kids out there and children out there that don't know that they are twins, and it's not going to come out until 2066. Don't ask me. I'm just reporting on the news. So what you guys think? Is this right? They say, oh, if we tell them, will they be happy to find their brother, sister? Or we're going to be shielding them from knowing that they were research piglets, you know, that they were guinea pigs used for this research, you know, and they'll be angry, you know. What you guys think? It was a good documentary, you know, but I'm happy that eventually they were able to, you know, kind of find some resolve, sort of. But it's sad that they lost a brother in the process. So thanks guys for watching. Be sure to like, be sure to subscribe, be sure to share and comment down below. See ya!